Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Not here to make you happy, not here to make you sad. Your feelings are irrelevant when debates are to be had. The Belfast Bapcast, loud and clear, covering the topics of the sphere, Working overtime to bring you many stories. Waking up today, the same Labour and Tories. A stage, it isn't our part to play. Is bringing you knowledge in this way. No filter, no fuss, just tell unfiltered fact. Much like the words on those Christian tracks.
And welcome to another edition of the Belfast Bapcast. And this evening we are joined by Chris Coverdale, peace activist and one of the most uncompromising critics of Britain's war and taxation. He argues that successive UK governments have repeatedly broken international law by waging aggressive wars, and said taxpayers themselves are complicit when their money funds these actions. Chris has spent time in prison for refusing to pay council tax, has campaigned for a lawful tax rebellion, and has published extensive research on the illegality of war, treaties such as the UN Charter, the Rome Statute, and the Nuremberg Principles. In this conversation, we will explore his personal journey, the legal foundations of his arguments, Britain's history of war, and his radical proposals for reform. The questions are designed to draw out both the passion and the controversy. So thank you for joining us, Chris.
Delighted. Thank you for inviting me.
So first question, what first opened your eyes to the idea paying tax itself could be a crime?
It goes back to 2002, when Britain had already started to wage war in Afghanistan. And in the summer of 2002, I was looking at the laws governing warfare and armed conflict. And I discovered that the British government had introduced a new law based on an international agreement that the world had taken to set up a law enforcement authority in The Hague. The Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court had come in and been ratified by Britain in 2001. And in the British ratification of that, which is the International Criminal Court Act of 2001, it made it a criminal offence of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. It introduced those three criminal offences and three others, which were conduct ancillary to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And when I started to look into what these laws actually said, it became quite clear to me that by paying tax, I was aiding and abetting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And this was taking place at that time in Afghanistan and was about to take place in Iraq. So that's when I first came across the real laws making it a criminal offence to take part in war. And, from then on, I've been doing my best to uphold those laws, and part of it is to withhold all taxes from the British government until they stop using my money for criminal purposes.
You've been waiting quite a while, I would imagine, given the current regimes.
Well, that was 2001, so now we are 2025, so 24 years. Or 23 years I've been working on this, but unsuccessful so far.
Tony Blair, quite the lizard, isn't he? Just a snake.
Yeah,
you were saying you tried to take Tony Blair to court?
Yes, and basically what we did was in 2002, some colleagues, end of 2002, beginning of 2003, three colleagues and myself tried to get an injunction from the High Court to stop the upcoming Iraq war. And that unfortunately failed about a week or so before we went to war with Iraq. But as a result of that, we knew that it is a criminal offence that Tony Blair and the cabinet and the government were committing the worst crimes known to mankind. And so we started reporting him to the police. And at that time, it was Lord Stevens who was in charge of the Metropolitan Police Service. And so following on from that, for the next 6 years, we reported war crimes, his war crimes, and him and his cabinet for the attacks on Afghanistan and Iraq, all of which were causing the deaths of more than 1 million people eventually.
In a just world, Tony Blair would be standing up in the Nuremberg court for crimes against humanity, but instead he gets nice wee speak rules, or he's a he had a role in the Middle East. That's at one point he was getting paid several million for advising. Like it's disgusting. Like these people get rewarded for death.
Yes, it is utterly appalling, and the UK government goes along with anything that the cabinet and the prime minister wants achieved, and we've had continuous war since 2001.
Yeah, and like Tony Blair came in with a smile on his face, you know, like an absolute snake in 1987, promising change. And well, we got change, but not the sort of change we wanted.
Absolutely.
Now, you spent time in prison for refusing to pay council tax, as I said in the introduction. Can you take us through that experience?
Yes, so having discovered that it is a criminal offence under section 51 and 52 of the International Criminal Court Act 2001, this is the law of England and Wales. Northern Ireland is sections 58 and 59, I think, of the same Act of Parliament. And Scotland has its own Act of Parliament. So all of those offences focus clearly on the non-transfer of money. The international statute, the Rome Statute, says quite clearly that providing assistance for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes is just as much of a crime. And that includes providing the means for the commission of the crime. So when I looked at that phrase, I realized that that includes the weapons, the money, the troops, anything, and training, and anything that goes towards the crime of genocide is a crime in the UK for every British citizen. It applies to everyone. One of the nice things about the International Criminal Court Act is section 78. And that says that this applies to the Crown and all agents of the Crown and all money and resources of the Crown. So the King, the Queen at that time, and the King now, every time they take us to war, they are committing the worst criminal offences internationally that it's possible to commit, and same domestically in English law. And so we have every right and duty not only to report them to the police, but to ensure that they are held to account for the crimes they are committing and causing us to commit unwittingly by paying taxes. So in the light of all of that, I then stopped paying council taxes, which at that time was the biggest personal expenditure I had in relation to tax.
So obviously it started getting letters, the threatening letters, etc. How did and when did it result?
Absolutely. For 10 years, in London, was in various different parts of London, and I got letters. I withheld taxes from every council that I was living in under, and for 10 years. And they sent letters, they sent bailiffs, they tried all sorts of things, but they never did anything about it, because, you know, when they read the rationale for going to war, not paying tax because they were taking us to war and using the money, they tried to find every excuse under the sun to avoid it, including saying that, of course, none of the council tax goes for the purposes of terrorism. Now, that is totally incorrect. What happens in this country is that when one pays any form of tax, and there are 230 sources of money going into the government every year, all the money goes straight into what's called the consolidated fund. It's one pot into which all taxes and all revenues from every source that go to the government are put into the one pot, and out of the same pot all expenditure comes. Now that consolidated fund in the year 2024 is over £1 trillion. And what we know is that of that £1 trillion, it includes 44 billion in council taxes. And once it's in there, then Parliament decides, or the government decides, how they're going to spend it. And we know that they spend at least 10% of that money on the Ministry of Defence and Warfare, and taking us to paying also for past wars, where we are still paying interest on the loans we took out to wage the war.
I mean, how do you convince the public that these wars are like for the benefit of our country? I mean, how on earth is a war in the Middle East good for the United Kingdom? You know, do you know what I mean? It's an absolute farce.
We agreed in 1945 in the United Nations Charter never to threaten or to use force, and to settle all disputes peacefully. In fact, prior to that, in 1928, after the First World War and the massacre of people in the trenches, both Germans and French and English, and Commonwealth countries, the world agreed what is now known as the Kellogg-Briand Pact, the Treaty for the Renunciation of War, which was signed in 1928 by all the major nations, saying we would never go to war. We renounce war and we will settle all disputes peacefully. Now, interesting enough, that is still in place, that law, and Germany's leaders were prosecuted for 11 breaches of the Kellogg-Briand Pact at Nuremberg, and they were held to account for those breaches, invading and occupying 11 nation states.
How do we
obviously killing their citizens and so on. So that was the background to it, and the important bit, in a sense, is if we have signed these laws, and these laws apply to every British citizen and universally to every nation worldwide, then we must do things to uphold them. And it's really, I've been saying, you know, it is our duty as individuals to take responsibility for the actions of our government. Every time we pay tax of any sort at all, we give our tacit consent to the way the government is using the money.
That's mind-blowing. We're stuck. I'm just saying, it's mind-blowing that people still believe in like this system, you know, that have faith in it. Like, they still believe the mainstream news, they still believe, you know, the government is, you know, doing the best for them. And it's insane, because like year after year they've lied about everything. So why would it be any different now? You know, they've done nothing but lie and deceive us.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what.
I'm afraid that's the case. You're quite right, Mark. It's deception, and we've been deceived for well over 100 years about the illegality of war. They keep telling us, I mean, I remember Tony Blair saying that the war with Iraq would be legal. It has been authorized by the UN Security Council under under the United Nations Security Council resolutions 678, 687, and 1441. That's what the Attorney General at the time, Lord Goldsmith, and Tony Blair told Parliament and the world and the public that it had been authorized by the Security Council. Now, that is complete lie. The Security Council is set up for peacekeeping, and Article 41 of the UN Charter says quite clearly the Security Council may decide what measures not involving the use of armed force are to be employed to give effect to its decisions. And now that statement is probably available to every citizen of the world. It's up there in public duty, and yet our government ignores it. And what I find extraordinary is that nobody seems to refer to the laws we've agreed with the rest of the world, the promises we've made that are absolutely fundamental to peace in this world. And we pay no attention to it at all. It
I
is
think
horrendous.
a big problem, though, Chris, is a large, majority of the population have zero interest in anything other than just having the stimulus of some description and dopamine hits. They're not concerned about laws or cultural issues. It's a very sad.
I completely agree with you. It is horrendous the way people just sit on the sofa and watch the football or their latest entertainment, whatever it is, and pay no attention to what's going on in the world. However, they do need to know that every time they pay tax, now the average number of taxpayers in Britain is about 50 million. The total taxes raised is 1 trillion. So that's roughly, that's £20,000 in taxes per taxpayer per year. And we know that 10% of that, £2,000 or so, thereabouts, goes towards mass murder and genocide. And yet they pay no attention to it at all. And it surprises me because tax is a major issue for most people. They find it really difficult to pay taxes, and it's often the choices between food or heating and paying tax. And I find that utterly appalling. So if we can get their attention to the fact that it is a criminal offence under the law of Britain, under the laws of Britain, to hand over money to anybody else, and that includes taxes, if you suspect it may be used for the purposes of war or terrorism and genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes.
Personally, I love people like yourself who feel strongly about stuff and are prepared to take a stance and spend 51 days in prison. Tell us what that was like. What was it like, 51 days inside?
It's not. I wouldn't recommend it to people. The first time I was sentenced at 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30 in the morning, and put in the prison cell under the court. And they were about to take me off to prison, but the guy who had taken me to the court in the first place was so appalled that he paid my council tax, and so they let me out after 1 day in the cells underneath. Then the following year, they sentenced me to 42 days in prison, again for I think they said unlawful or withholding tax, whatever. I can't remember the exact criminal offence, but it was not a criminal offence. It's a civil offence. And so I was sent to Lewes Prison, which is a really nasty place, my local prison, Victorian. It's got 3 people to cells designed for 1 or possibly 2. It's overcrowded, and there was 23 hours a day lockdown, and it's really not a very pleasant place at all. I raised a bit of a stink there, and eventually they sent me off for the rest of after 9 days, they sent me to Ford Open Prison, which was a slightly better regime. But I still served the 42 days. A lot of people ask me, what was it like? And I said, well, funnily enough, I was sent at the age of 8 to a Benedictine monastic boarding school in Yorkshire until 18. And I found that, therefore, the conditions I was very familiar with. A lot of other people who've never been away from home or sent away from home for that sort of length of time find it very difficult going to prison, but I found it reasonably I was used to it. Let's put it that way.
Just institutional, isn't it? Really, it's just the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
So, did you come out health-wise any different, or?
Yeah, I'm slightly slimmer because the food wasn't that good, but no, there's no problem. I mean, they have to feed you. They have to. I had some very useful time actually going through the prison library and spending most of my time reading very interesting books and law and various other things. In fact, on the last occasion I was in prison, I was allowed after a week to take out books from the library, and the librarian there, he said, haven't I seen you before? I said, yes, last year. Anyway, I took out a whole lot of law books. And he said, what do you want to do that for? And I said, well, I want to get myself out of here. He said, we've been trying that for years. None of us have succeeded. But strangely enough, 8 hours after I had taken those books out, I was released. And so I sent a little message back with the books to the librarian saying, well, this time it worked. In fact, it wasn't anything to do with the books, but anyway.
Well, past in prison. So the Nuremberg principle says that it's the duty of citizen to say deny or disobey unlawful orders. So how do we wake up the average person to understand that paying tax is making them complicit to?
I've been trying to work on this, Mark, for some 25 years, really. Since I first read the Nuremberg, I'm not the full one, but I did quite a lot of work on the Nuremberg judgment. And it's appalling how it is part of the military law in this country, and yet none of our military officers or men and women know it. It's written into the Manual of the Law of Armed Conflict, the Armed Services Manual of the Law of Armed Conflict by the Ministry of Defense. And yet nobody pays any attention to it. They have a legal duty to refuse to obey an illegal order. But of course, they are trained from day one to obey the orders. Most of them have never been told about the duty to disobey an illegal order. And even if they did, they have no understanding of what is an illegal order. They assume that every order that comes down from the top is legal and lawful and legitimate, and therefore they follow it.
So
that's a big mistake.
Can you explain how UK law, for example, the Terrorism Act and ICC Act 2001 supports your case that taxpayers could be liable for prosecution?
Yes. So it starts with the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. So for 60 years, the international community has been trying to set up a law enforcement authority because the big nations particularly Britain, America, Israel, France, and one or two others, are constantly breaking the promises we made to the rest of the world in 1945. Now, this is translated, it first was translated by the smaller nations in 1962, raised in the United Nations General Assembly the issue about the Security Council nations, the big five permanent members of the Security Council, seem to be constantly breaching the agreements made in the UN Charter. So what could we do about it? So they raised it with the General Assembly, and the General Assembly gave the problem to the International Law Commission. And the International Law Commission spent 8 years trying to come up with a definition of what does the UN Charter mean in relation to the use of force or and peacekeeping. And having worked on it for 8 years, they came out with a declaration. It's called the United Nations Declaration on Principles of International Law. And it is very clear. It says quite clearly that breaches of the UN Charter are offences under international law. And it's a very interesting document to read, but nobody's ever heard of it. Certainly our parliament hasn't heard of it. Even the Attorney General and others have not heard of it, and they certainly don't pay any attention to it or to the UN Charter. So we have to somehow get leaders and politicians in particular, and possibly the people behind them running the world, the bankers and the wealthy investors who run the world, to start to promote what the law actually says and how we have to how it must be upheld. Now, how we do that is a different problem. I'm hoping that we can get the new Attorney General and the new Advocate General for Scotland to do what they say they're going to do, and that is to get Parliament and the British public and everybody else upholding and enforcing international law.
So tomorrow night we have Kavanaugh on, and you know about the International Court of this tribunal they have. They've issued warrants against world leaders, etc. But how do you enforce these things? You know, like how do you go to the Prime Minister and say, "Here, mate, you know, you're committing a crime." You know, we do have the right to do a citizen's arrest. In reality,
yes.
It's
no,
not.
I've tried that. There are several things we can do, and I think the important thing is to realise that it is a criminal offence under Article 27 of the Rome Statute and Section 78 of the International Criminal Court Act. It makes it quite clear that this applies to heads of state, members of parliament, everybody. And so we need to publicise as far as we can under the publicise these facts, that this is what the law says, and it applies to everybody, including the King, the Attorney General, the Prime Minister, and everybody else. Now, if the Advocate General and the Attorney General do what they say they're going to do, that would be one route by which we could get that information through Parliament, through the Defence Committee or the Justice Committee, whatever it is. And there are various committees whose role it is to tell Parliament what's going on, and particularly these bits of information of how they have been conned and deceived for 75 years over the illegality of war. So I'm hoping to get various reports and other things to senior people in the political parties, in Parliament and to the government. I've tried. One of the things that we can try, and everybody else can try in this country, is to report these crimes to their local police station. If you report a crime under the International Criminal Court Act, Articles 51 and 52, that our leaders, Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Tony Blair, and the others, they have all broken these laws and committed the worst criminal offences known to mankind. And so it is up to us to report this to our local police. We can do that, and at the same time inform the police that they must pass this information to the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity unit at New Scotland Yard. They are supposedly, sorry?
I was going to say, can you just explain the actual difference between common law and legislative law?
Oh, right, sorry. Well, I'm really working on statute law, which are the laws that our government and courts in this country tend to uphold. Common law, which comes first, but has been almost forgotten in this country. We could have a common law court that set it up. Unfortunately, the current law courts and system in this country pays so little attention to it that it never gets anywhere. There have been 1 or 2 common law courts set up. And I really applaud Kevin Annett for trying to do it. We need to do more of it in this country. So if people around the country feel that it's the thing to do, they can set up a common law court, and I can provide lots and lots of evidence of the crimes committed by our leaders over the last, well, certainly 20 years. I think it's probably important to keep it, not to go back too far, but to people who are alive and kicking today. We can get them charged and tried and convicted in a common law court, and that information can be passed on to the statute courts in this country as evidence to get them to start to do what they are paid to do, which is to uphold the statute laws.
So in the meantime, though, how would you propose the individual taxation trust? Would you how does that work?
The taxes, well, yes, what I found was that it is a criminal offence under section 15 and 17 of the Terrorism Act 2000 and section 52 of the International Criminal Court Act 2001 to pay tax, basically, if you hand over money, which you know will be used for the purposes of war, genocide, crimes against humanity, terrorism, acts of terrorism. You commit a criminal offence as a taxpayer, and the tax collectors commit criminal offences. So having been sent to prison for 10 years, for 3 years in a row, from 2013 to 2017, I think it was, I discovered or did a lot of work to say, I've got to find a different way around this. And one of the things that I had come across is the law on trusts. The top 50,000 to 100,000 people in this country hide their ill-gotten gains and money in tax havens, in trusts. And when you put money in a trust, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the trustees on behalf of the beneficiaries. So I thought, well, okay, why don't we put taxes? Why don't I put my taxes in trust for the government, for the council, on condition that they use the money for lawful purposes only and never for criminal purposes. So I did that for 3 years until 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. About 2020, 2021, I started to pass this out to other people. I felt, well, it's been well enough tested. It is quite lawful for me to, and I have a legal duty to put the money in trust and not to hand it to the government. And if I hand it to the government, I commit a crime. So therefore, I don't want to commit crime. I'm going to put it in trust. Now, the key thing about this trust is it's a conditional trust, and it comes to an end on the 6th of April, which is the day, or the 5th of April, the last day of the financial tax year. And if by the 5th of April, the government have not proved to my trustees that they are not using any of the money for criminal purposes, and all of it is being used for lawful purposes, then of course they can have the money. My trustee must hand it over to them as the primary beneficiary of the trust. However, also written into the conditions is if they can't do that, the money must go to the secondary beneficiary, and the secondary beneficiary is me. Now, it is possible for me to put the taxes in trust for the trustee to pay to the primary beneficiary. And if they don't meet the conditions, it's paid to the secondary beneficiary. So I get the money back at the end of the year. Now, that's very powerful in a way. It enables everybody in this country, if we want it, to set up a declaration and deed of trust. Now, they can download the forms from our website. It's a very simple one. We now have a 4-pager, 2 pages of the Declaration and Deed of Trust, 1 page of the laws that back it up, and 1 page of the explanation of how to go about and why you are filling it in. So that can be downloaded from our website, probityco.com. I'll put it up at the end.
All the descriptions anyway for you. So all your links will be in the descriptions. But has there been much of a personal cost over the 25 years with the dedication that you've had? And obviously, you've had a lot of grief from political sources.
Yes, I mean, we still get grief. I mean, this is the problem, is that the government pays no attention to the laws of war at all. And that includes local government officers, the Revenue and Customs, and the DVLA, and every other tax-raising body, if you like, including company directors of large businesses. One of the things that I'm now trying to promote is for businesses to set up corporate trusts for all the taxes they claim and take from their employees, and they pay to the Revenue and Customs. So we've now been doing this for a couple of years, and I have examples of 1 or 2 companies who have withheld the PAYE and national insurance contributions of their employees, and the VAT, which they would normally pay straight to the Revenue and Customs, and the corporation tax, which they would pay at the end of the year. They've withheld it all in a trust for the government and for the councils for until April the 5th of this year, just gone, April 2025. And in April 2025, they informed the Revenue and Customs and the councils that they no longer had any right to the money. It was nullified. Their rights to the money were nullified and void on the grounds that the money would have been used for criminal purposes. And so the money came back to the employees, and they were very pleased with that, I'm pleased to say. So we need to get more companies doing the same thing.
If I tomorrow was to follow your advice and start to withhold my tax, what would the immediate consequences be if I was to set up the trust, etc.?
Yes, It varies enormously. Some people just, it bemuses the local council and they just ignore people completely. They've ignored me now for the past 5 years. They had so much trouble with me beforehand that they know they're not going to get any money. It's not worth their while trying to get the £1,500 or £2,000, whatever it is that I need to pay to them. It costs them more in admin fees and everything else. So they pass it on to the bailiffs, and the bailiffs try it, and they don't succeed, so they pass it on to another bailiff, and so on. All of that can be refuted by the individual taxpayer. So you would not need to allow the bailiffs into your house. You just remind them that it is a criminal offence. They are committing a criminal offence. All the details are in the declaration and deed. They've had a copy of that. And if they continue to do that, you have a legal duty under Section 19 of the Terrorism Act 2000 to report them to the police for their crimes, the crime of tax raising for the purposes of terrorism. And
So
if you fail to report, sorry?
I was going to ask, how does the court have the gall then to like just dismiss these laws without merit?
I'm afraid our courts are corrupt to the core, Mark. I've never yet found a court in this country that is not corrupt. And that goes right up to the Supreme Court. I had a good example of even the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom committed a serious offence by misleading the public on a case to do with terrorism. There was a case in 2013, I think, or 2012, of Mohammed Gul, Regina versus Mohammed Gul. So Regina versus Gul, which was UK's Supreme Court case 64 in 2013, I think it was, in which the definition of they had to define the definition of terrorism. Mohammed Gul had been imprisoned for putting up a video on the internet of taken by the Taliban of a successful attack on UK soldiers, soldiers in Afghanistan, and he got 5 years for that. And the case went right up to the Supreme Court, and it depended on the definition of terrorism. So Supreme Court cases will go through what the law says to start the case going. So paragraph 4 of that case, I think it is, goes through what the law says, what the Terrorism Act 2000 says about the definition of terrorism. And they quoted it. Section 1 says this, Section 2 says, Section 1.1 says this, Section 1.2 says this, Section 1.4 says this, and Section 1.5 says this. So when reading it, I thought, well, why did they leave out Section 1.3? That's the most important section in the definition of terrorism. And I realized that they left it out because they could not have come to the ruling they came to if they had included Section 1.3 of the law. For a Supreme Court to do this is quite incredible.
It's not surprising, though, in this day and age, really. The corruption is right. It's everywhere.
It is.
Everywhere
you look.
You convince a judge of your legal stance, or have you been denied at every turn?
No, I've been to court about somewhere over 70 times in the last 20 years. Different courts, magistrates' courts, county courts, the High Court, the Court of Appeal. I never managed to get to the Supreme Court, but every time they will find some excuse. The ones that really aggravate me is when we go to the High Court. I tried to take the Attorney General to court for false legal advice to Parliament and so on. And the court just came back and said, well, this is non-justiciable. I mean, absolute rubbish. Of course it's justiciable, but if they say it's non-justiciable, what can one do?
That's the mad thing about court, especially a magistrate's court. You know, if you're up for, it doesn't matter if you have proof beyond reasonable doubt. It's just up to the judge's decision. You know,
they just ignore the law, quite honestly, Mark. Every time, I've had so many times in magistrates' courts where they just ignore it completely. You know, I'm quoting the fact that it's a criminal offence for the judge just as much as it is for me to force me to pay money to the government, because all the money that goes to the court goes straight into the consolidated fund and goes from there into genocide and crimes against humanity by Britain's forces or by the government supporting other people's criminal forces.
Why do you think the British UK public are so disengaged with?
What do I think? What?
Why do you think the British public are so disengaged with the illegality of war? You know, they just accept that.
I think you were right in saying, you know, that there's just no interest in it. We spend all our time watching football matches and watching Coronation Street or something on the television and going to work. They have no real interest in the politics and the laws that they uphold. And of course, there are no senior people in this country ever prosecuted for their war crimes. We haven't had a war criminal. British politicians have been committing war crimes for 100 years, but none of our people have ever been held to account in court for them. So they carry on.
Even Winston Churchill with the bomb of Dresden.
Absolutely, he was the worst of the lot. I mean, he was personally responsible for 65 million deaths in the Second World War. Absolutely. I know that Hitler had 8 attempts at a peace treaty, and he turned every one of them down.
He wanted the war. They wanted to go to war because his financial backers wanted them to go to war. So it was always going to be that way. And then the bombing of Dresden was absolutely devastating. Like, that was one of the biggest war crimes of the Second World War.
Absolutely. And they bombed in the end 65 German cities for the purpose of destroying the civilian population, not for the purposes of a military target. Same with Dresden. There was no military target in Dresden. And it was at least 100,000 people killed in that in 2 days. And it could well have been up to 250,000 people.
If you had 5 to 10 minutes to speak directly to the Prime Minister, what would you speak to him about?
Good question. I just really sort of say, well, look, if our leaders and taxpayers upheld the law, Britain would never wage war. We need to know what the law says, the promises we've made to the rest of the world, and how we break them every day. And we've been breaking them every day since 1946. We fought 85 wars, illegal, all of them except one and possibly 2 being illegal. It's quite incredible.
The better way that you would get people on board with your movement is to tap into the greed side of it, that they're saving money, because you're never going to be reading laws or educating themselves. You'll get a few, but the vast majority will just be like, I can save money, okay, what do you have to do, you know? But most people are so indifferent to what's going on.
Yes, I mean, at least we might be able to persuade a large number of taxpayers. And I think if we do it through businesses, then we have a real chance. I don't know if you know of the Wetherspoons. Do you know Wetherspoons, the hospitality chain?
Yeah.
They have. It's a very good outfit, really, providing cheap food and cheap drink to British citizens. But as Tim Martin, their chief executive, no, he's chairman now. He has been complaining about tax for years, but every year he publishes the amount of tax they pay. Now, last year, Wetherspoons were responsible for transferring £780 million to the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Revenue and Customs. Now, we know that between 10 and 15% of that will have gone for genocide. So Wetherspoons alone probably is responsible for £100 million going towards mass murder and genocide. They need to know that. And I think if we can get one company director prosecuted for handing over tax, knowing it will be used for criminal purposes, they could be sent, if they were charged under the International Criminal Court Act, they could be sent to prison for 30 years. Or they even go to The Hague.
It's getting them enforced is the problem, you know?
Yes. So anything you can do, anything, I will continue to try to pass the word around. Let's get some of these people held to account in court for their crimes, and not just the people that take us to war, but the people who fund war, the biggest business taxpayers.
Unaware that they can set up their own tribunals and they can set up their own common law courts. It's fully lawful to do so.
Yes, and there's plenty of material, they can use in those common law courts. We tried doing one as part of the Occupy movement in St. Paul's. We tried a one-day common law court. Of course, it didn't get very far, but we had clear evidence of the war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide that were taking place in Afghanistan and Iraq. There are ex-soldiers and others who are very happy to and willing to talk to common law courts. There are members of Revenue and Customs and company directors and others who are happy to tell people about their understanding of how the money is being used for criminal purposes. Yeah. So I do think it's worthwhile trying to set them up anywhere we can.
It just highlights how corrupt every single part of the system is. You know, there's very little chinks in the armor. Like, no matter if you go to your local council or you go to your local politician, they're all corrupt. You know, they're all.
But they don't realize it, really. I mean, a lot of them are totally unaware of any of these laws, and so if we can get just a few of them to understand it through a local common law court, that would be a great step forward, because then we can take it forward from the power base of councils or Revenue and Customs.
So what would a fully lawful Britain look like?
Wouldn't that be lovely? Well, I'm just restricting it to the laws of war and peace, because there are lots of other international laws to do with banking, with commerce and other things. We need to have a major change in all of these areas, quite honestly. And I personally will look forward to the day when we decentralize the power to local individuals and communities. And that really is the underpinning of the Declaration and Deed of Trust. What it does, it takes the power away from the Cabinet and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Revenue and Customs, to use our money for criminal purposes, and it brings it right back down to every individual. So if you sign your Declaration and Deed of Trust, you take responsibility for how your money is going to be used. And you say, this is what I want. I want it spent on natural health or on local home education or whatever it is. And that in that way, we can take the power away from the central government and give it to the local community. And if we set up local community cooperatives and others, we can start to run our own affairs. Even, it's like having our own nation locally, our own states.
Where do you get the energy?
We want to get away from centralized power.
Where do you get the energy from to just?
That's a good question.
For 2 decades.
Yes, I'm getting on now, and sometimes I feel it. I shall be 80 next year. I think the energy comes from knowing that we're doing the right thing, that this is helpful to everybody, that we must hold our leaders to account. All the major problems in the world stem from warfare and the financial benefits of waging war. We have to stop it. And if we can do that and do everything in our power to uphold and enforce the laws against war and for permanent peace, then I think we can make a radical change in the way society runs throughout the world.
So if people actually listened, what would be your message to them?
I think there's 2 or 3 parts to it. The first one is find out for yourself why paying tax is a criminal offense. Once you understand what you are contributing your money towards and the horror and the mass murder that is taking place as a result of you continuing to pay tax, you will start to understand the importance of withholding it lawfully. And it's very important to understand that by putting it in trust, you are using the system they use against us, against them. So the Recognition of Trusts Act, 1982 or 87, I forget which it is, makes it quite clear that this is a lawful way of doing it. And every single one, just about, of the senior politicians and others are using trusts to escape paying tax in this country, putting their money overseas. We need to use the same system, but to ensure that our taxes are spent on what we want it to be spent, not on criminal offences.
Yeah, and the general public even are largely numb to tragedies happening.
So anything you can do, Mark, to get the word out and to encourage people to take action. Kevin Annett was saying yesterday, or when I watched his program, action is most important. And that's the same with tax. A lot of people think, well, that's a good idea, but they continue to pay tax. And they are giving their consent to genocide in that and funding genocide. So they need to know that.
Outside of war, tax on your labor is illegal under common law. It's not it's a gray area as it is anyway, without funding, illegal wars.
Yeah, I mean, the way it happened for me was to read the UN Charter and the Kellogg-Briand Pact and the Declaration on Principles of International Law. And when I read it, it became absolutely crystal clear to me that it's a criminal offense to pay tax. So don't.
I'm going to include all links as to your website and where people can reach you. Now, you are obviously a very intelligent man. You've absorbed a lot of information. But the point I'm trying to make is most people are not going to have the effort levels that you have had to discover. But you've broke it down for people into a 4-page document as to what what they have to do, so they don't have to do the same amount of research that you've done, basically.
Oh, right. And I think they get over the fear that underpins this by trying it and doing it. And I'm pleased to say the more people that do it, the more people are coming on board with it. And we know at least 1,000 people are filling in these declaration and deeds of trust. And we've got 8 to 10 companies doing the same. And the last one I spoke to was saving £170,000 last year and passing that back to their employees and shareholders. So
well, I happen to own a company, so
yeah, but it's even,
yeah.
I even tried not paying VAT at my local cafe and so on, and that worked quite well, but that's another story.
So I would just like to say thank you for joining us this evening, Chris. It's been great having a conversation with you, and very informative.
Delighted.
And
So
to
delighted.
everybody
Thank you very much, Mark, and I've enjoyed it.
Yes, if you stay online here, just once the end screen comes up. So if everybody could like, share, and subscribe, and that has been the Belfast Bapcast. So thank you. And
Yeah. Not here to make you happy, not here to make you sad. Your feelings are irrelevant when debates are to be had. The Belfast Bapcast, loud and clear, covering the topics others fear, Working overtime to bring you many stories, waking up today the same Labour and Tories. A stage, it isn't our part to play, is bringing you knowledge in this way. No filter, no fuss, just tell unfiltered fact, much like the words on those Christian tracks.